Hello, my name is Judith Woodfield and I've been using CLIL in my teaching for 18 years now in 3 different schools and for a range of subjects: geography, PSHE and PE, and it works. So the 3 schools that I have taught in have been very different: an all-girls comprehensive, a mixed rural comprehensive in Northamptonshire, and finally an inner city school where there were high levels of deprivation, special educational needs, EAL, and also a hearing impaired unit. However, with all this experience, I feel that I can now give you some top tips about structuring your work and also about providing routines that will engage and move the students forward. Talking about structure, first of all, the geography units were divided into topic areas, say map work, deserts, tropical rainforests. And what I did was I built up lesson by lesson development of key concepts to cover the knowledge and understanding required for the content, but at the same time developing language awareness and techniques to engage students in language acquisition, so that finally the end of unit task or assessment became accessible to them, and they were able to apply all of their techniques to one very major piece of work. This piece of work could be in a variety of media, for example, as a radio broadcast, designing something, a role play, a debate, but always there were elements of both oral and written communication involved. Mostly they were group work centred, so that students could support each other in most of the phases of the development of the project. But there were also big pieces of homework that were challenging and involved the students in research in the target language, often in books or on the internet, using authentic materials. The final assessment was a combination of self, peer and teacher assessment, giving feedback that was rich and informative, not just about the content, but also about the skills that the students had acquired during that unit of work. However, to reach that very high standard, I've had to develop lots of routine ways of accessing language as we've gone on, without reducing or watering down the content and the challenge of thinking skills throughout the content. So if I take the first set of skills, which are trying to encourage spontaneous language, let me give you some top tips there. First of all, you're entering a level playing field with CLIL. So students who have hearing impairments, who are EAL or SEN, are on the same footing as all the other students in the class. So there shouldn't be confidence affecting their ability to learn. So to encourage this, I developed a point system so that for every piece of spontaneous target language, there would be a point. And that even involved answering their name in the register. So every student would always start with 1 point every lesson. Using mini whiteboards also enabled all students to contribute to key questions, enabled the teacher to assess their competence and their understanding, but also encouraged them to contribute to the discussions. When asking questions, I also encouraged students to use as much French as they could, but they could also add a bit of English to the end of the sentence if they couldn't find their way forward. For example, je suis pour le UE parce que c'est bon pour freedom of movement. So the student doesn't know the word freedom of movement, so I would model that on the board and enable the rest of the class to access those words and use them in their answers, thereby developing the language used in the debate further. For reading and comprehension, I often used mini translators in the class. There were always very keen, enthusiastic students who wanted to show that they'd unscrambled the meaning of some authentic text. By using the mini translator, it was the student who gave the answer in English. And that gave confidence to all the other students to have a go. But all the time I would ask the student, how did you get that answer? How did you unscramble it? And they would talk about using cognates and managing the gap, looking for words that they knew the meaning of on either side, and managing the bit in the middle that they were guessing. This whole notion of getting the gist is a very useful technique to engender confidence amongst the students. And there are other techniques for assimilating the vocabulary that are also very important without detracting from the learning of the content. Techniques such as card sorts, classification, using opposites like for and against, before and after, cause and effect, getting students to move around the class, asking other students questions in a questionnaire type format to get them using the language in a relevant and meaningful way. Once the students are confident about reading, they can develop and access authentic videos. And I've used authentic videos. I've used particularly the subtitles on the screen to help students access the content, sometimes in English, sometimes in the target language, depending on the context. But I've also used listening cards where I've put a transcript of the text used on the video alongside a picture. And once students have heard that on the video, they'll turn it over. We'll then discuss the gist and then re-watch the video. To move that even further, particularly for the deaf students, I've taken screenshots of videos with their subtitles. And we've then looked at all of those extracts, found out the gist, and again re-watched the video. And that's really important in order to access the really important content for the geographical themes that we're studying. Finally, getting to grips with writing has been relatively straightforward because I've used the same techniques I would use in English as I've used in French. So structuring the writing with things like point, evidence, explain, but also using writing frames, sometimes colour-coded, or sometimes using structures like what goes in an introduction, what goes in the first paragraph, how do you connect one paragraph to another, what connectives will you use. That sort of approach has really given the students the confidence they need to access that final, complex, challenging task. Once they've completed the task, self and peer assessment are modelled using exemplar materials, and the class can respond to presentations and role plays, again using prompts to tick off when students have accomplished various elements of the assessment criteria, which are also written in the target language. So finally, having upskilled all of the students, they've been able to access that creativity, and they have become independent, effective, international learners.